Okay, then, Jack. This question I think is right up your street. So, what does an automation project actually involve?
So, in my opinion, the automation project actually begins before the automation project even starts. You need to understand where
Sorry, it begins before it starts.
begins before it begins. Yes. Once we've got the idea of what are we wanting to actually automate, what are we wanting to implement AI into, all of that kind of those kind of questions, we can then start to think around. Well, is the process that we've got at the moment correct? Is it the best process that we can have? And that's where we start looking at the actual process mapping for it. Where does it start? Who does it involve? Who are the touch points? What systems are involved? What data do we need? All of those questions are what we ask, and we need to be able to understand for the full scope of the process that we're actually looking to automate. Once we've got all of those, we can then start to think around, well, what technologies would be appropriate here?
Would you start by like putting just a simple flow chart together
Absolutely.
so that people can visualize this and then they can check that process?
Absolutely.
I think that probably helps you then take it by having that finalized, and you've almost like got internal sign off that that's exactly as we do it. That's exactly as we want it to happen, and so you kind of got that refined. That really helps you take that to the kind of build stage.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then when you're at the build stage, that's where the boring stuff happens. That's where you actually put the process together and you build it and you do all that. It's very exciting for me, but for most people, it's like watching paint dry. But that is the bit where you can then start seeing that tangible benefit. Once the build is complete, we can then start demonstrating it and showing, look, this is how it now works. And seeing
How do you find testing that then?
testing for me comes in two forms. You've got actual functional testing. You've clicked a button. Does it do what you wanted the button to do? Yes. If it doesn't, no, it's broken. You need to fix it. But what I find really interesting is when you start actually going into the sort of the requirement testing of, I have built this to do this, and it does work, and it does this. Is that what you wanted to actually do? Because often, when you get to that stage, especially if you've not necessarily got the process as defined as possible, maybe it might be that the wrong people have been involved in the process. You might find that once you get to that point of the automation and it functions and does what it needs to do, is that correct? Might be yes, might be no. What you can also find as well at that point is when you start asking the question of, is this correct? And they start seeing it actually function, you start seeing light bulbs go off as people start thinking, oh, well, if it can do this, can it also do this? It's not part of the process at the moment, but it would be brilliant if we could, because then we could give a better experience. We could bring this other process in and daisy chain it together, and it's more that can be done.
And it's often where I see projects fail or where frustration can kind of creep in, because suddenly you get this scope creep within the project. And so what typically happens is the business owner has signed off the project, or the senior leadership team has signed off the project. It's perhaps been handed down to somebody else to own and kind of see that through. And suddenly the scope can creep and we start adding these bolt-ons, and it delays go live. And I think often there's a real decision tree there that goes actually, and almost some discipline says, no, let's get phase one done. Because otherwise projects can elongate, and suddenly what's going to be a couple of weeks suddenly somehow turns into 6 months, because we're constantly looking for perfection. These ones, let's get people using and testing and getting it rolled out really quickly. And I think sometimes people struggle with that balance.
I think from a technical perspective, one of the things to really sort of keep in mind is when you are working on these kind of projects and looking at implementing these tools, it's considering building it in a way that supports modularity. Being able to take a part of the system that you are ready, it's built, it's ready to go. Someone can look at that and push that live and let the feedback start rolling in. Might even be they're actually using it and it's production worthy. And that is a really useful thing to be able to do, rather than trying to do it in this very linear pathway of, no, I need to build it all first, then we'll test it all. You'll end up in that loop of build, test, build, test, build, test, because it will never, ever meet all the requirements to finish that testing phase to go live. Whereas if you build, test, release, and then go back to the drawing board, build, test, release, you can start building these automations iteratively, and you'll start introducing benefit to the business a lot faster than if you try to do everything all at the same time.
And financially, again, I've seen very real examples where people haven't taken that modular approach and they've burned thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds by trying to do it as a really big project and get it all done in a big release, and they just never get to the end.
Yeah.